We are here with Lynn Forney. Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
And
Hi, Lynn.
what were you going to say, hon?
I just said hi, Lynn.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask you if you knew who the world's most famous Lynn is.
I don't.
It's a head scratcher, right?
It is.
Because I was like, who's the most famous Lynn? So I looked it up.
Okay.
And it's hands down Lynn Redgrave.
Okay.
Yeah. Lynn Redgrave, she's an actress. She was the star of Shine and Gods and Monsters and some other really notable movies. But I thought that was interesting because she's a little bit of an older actress, that there hasn't been a more famous Lynn that's come along since her, but she still holds the top spot. So you're probably second under that.
We're going to make sure you're second.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll take it.
All right. Thank you for that, Lynn. I am Laura Cathcart Robbins, and this is the only one in the room. But I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co-host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, Hun. So today, like I said, we're talking to Lynn Forney. She is a dancer, choreographer, actor, director, and writer. Which we'll get to talk to her about that as well throughout the interview. But Lynn, I just wanted to say to you first, what happened to you is one of the things that I lose sleep trying to prevent. It's why I have a home security system. It's why I sleep with our bedroom door open so I can hear everything that happens in the house. I'm always listening, always scanning the house for any unusual noise. But you were a 21-year-old dance major. Is that right? Home from
Yes.
school, visiting your mom. We've seen that 1,000 times. You know, our kids have come home and done the same thing. And you woke up to a stranger in your bed stabbing you. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah. I sleep on my stomach typically, and I woke up kind of, groggily, obviously. Is that a word? Groggily?
I believe it's a word, yes.
Okay, thanks. And I was being kind of lifted up, I was being lifted up, and I felt these, large hands around my chest, essentially. And I heard a voice from my left side say, "Don't worry, my friend, of your mother's," which, very quickly I realized that's not true. But I just turned and I saw this man sitting next to me on the bed, and I just kind of instinctively went into like this crouch position, and I just started screaming and flailing. I just started screaming, "Mom 911, Mom 911," like over and over and over again. And I felt this really hard jab at my left side. And I will say that I didn't feel anything else. But I just kept screaming, and I don't know how to explain how I knew, but I knew I was getting stabbed. Like, I never saw the knife. I didn't feel any other like wounds happening, but I just knew this was what was going on. And after a time, he just got up and literally like ran out of my room, and I stood up and I looked down, and blood was just pouring everywhere, all over the floor.
Oh my God.
And I looked back up, and my mom came in, and I was just yelling at her like, "A man stabbed me, call 911." And in her half hazed, because again, this was like 2:30 in the morning, she was like, "There's no man here." And I'm like, "Just call 911." I'm just like screaming at her, like telling her what to do. And our bedrooms in that house are like next to each other. And so she went in to use the phone in her room, and it was off the hook. So then she ran into like the living room, and I just was like, if I don't get an ambulance here, I'm dead. Like, that's it. And so my phone was on the floor. I'd been talking on my Garfield phone that I'd gotten when I was 10 years old. I loved that phone.
Yeah.
And I'd been talking with a girlfriend the night before. And so I just kind of fell to the floor and grabbed the phone, and I heard her speaking to a dispatcher. And I just think, okay, thank God, someone's going to come.
Wow. So I just want to thank you for telling that. I don't know how many times you've retold that story, and I don't know what it feels like for you to have to relive that. And as you're talking, there's in the news currently, there's the tragedy that happened in Moscow, Idaho, where those 4 victims, those 4 kids were stabbed in their beds. And trying to make sense of the other 2 people that were in the house that didn't hear anything. So your mom was next to you. She didn't hear him enter the home, right?
Correct.
And did she not hear you until after he left? Is that correct?
Yeah. I don't have, a stopwatch to tell you that it happened in this many
Yeah.
seconds, but
Yeah.
it's amazing how quickly it happened, but also how long it felt. It was this very strange perception of time that I
Right.
can't even really put into words. Because like I said, when he said those words to me, I immediately thought, like, did someone come home with her? But no, this is my mother. Like, she wouldn't do that. That she doesn't know him. Like those thoughts just so rapidly happened in
Right.
probably a millisecond. And so he stabbed me 7 times and ran away. So that probably happened in a matter of seconds. So the time she literally, woke up and got up, I mean, he had run out and she kind of came in. And a police officer kind of explained to her, you get tunnel vision, where he could have been right next to her and she wouldn't have seen him at all. It's a very
Because she's
common
focused on
thing.
you.
Right, because she's hearing her daughter screaming like bloody
Right.
murder, right?
Yeah.
And but it is weird. And she told me later she had a parrot at the time, and she did hear something ruffle or like rustle, and she kind of had this moment of like, what was that? And then she went, oh, it's just the bird,
Right.
and kind of
Right.
brushed it off. So I think she's probably going to forever wonder if that was him or if it was the bird. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that you can't know what you do until you're in that situation. I can, what is it called? Monday night quarterback. No, whatever, you know what I mean. After the
Yeah.
game is played,
Right.
like say what I would have done, or what I think I would have heard, but you just don't know until you're in that situation.
Yeah,
And you both went to sleep assuming you both be safe for the night,
of course.
right?
Yeah.
Because you always have been. What was your neighborhood like?
It's a well kept, very middle class neighborhood. Like I know Boca Raton is kind of known for being hot, ritzy and all that.
Yeah, yeah,
Not everyone is rich from there. I will
right.
attest to that. So like all the houses are kind of ranch style, built in the 60s, kind of cement. But no the HOA, but everyone kept their yard really neat and clean. So it's a nice, cute little older neighborhood.
Right.
Where probably not much happens,
Right. And you had not heard of any other crimes like this one occurring in your neighborhood at that
No,
time, right?
definitely not.
So he did not come into your bed to sexually assault you.
I am not sure. I always had this feeling, kind of just a knowing that I do think he was going to rape me first. It's interesting that people, and I don't often say it because I got people telling me like, well, you don't know that. You don't know
Right.
that.
Well,
I'm
tell
like,
us what you felt though. Yeah.
I just in that instant, I mean, why else, kind of in my mind, like, why else would a man be in my bed? And why would he have
Right.
said anything to me to wake me up? And why would he
Yeah.
be picking me up? I think, this is kind of morbid, but I feel like he would have just started stabbing me. That's his only
Yeah.
goal. And he did do different things to different people, but rape was definitely a large motivator for him. And so it's a gut feeling and knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I at least saved myself from getting raped first. He obviously had a knife with him. I don't know if that was going to be a tactic to put me into submission.
Right.
I don't really know. And of course I don't know, for certain, but I do think that was going to happen first.
Did he seem rageful as it was happening? Did you get a sense that this was business as usual, or he was furious, or what did it feel like?
Gosh, that's a good question. No one's ever asked me that.
Hmm.
I got like chills in my midsection though when you asked me that. I think it started as business as usual for him, and I think me screaming and fighting back made him go into a rage. But yeah, that's such an interesting question. Yeah.
Well, I have no concept of a mind that would do this. I can't conceive of what might have been going. As many shows as I watch or articles as I read, I still don't get it. I
Yeah.
don't get that. I'm sure I never will.
Yeah,
But
me too.
I wanted to wait, where on your body did he stab you?
I have the first wound was kind of towards the back lower part of my torso, and then I have one just kind of underneath my breast, kind of went between my ribs. And then I have another one in the lower side of my stomach, in this, because he was on the left side. And then I have one across my wrist. I had one across my ear, and then one across the back of my neck, and then one in my leg. It severed my
Wow.
peroneal nerve, so right underneath, kind of side of my knee.
The wrist, was that a defense wound?
Yes, because like I said, I was just kind of doing this, and I
Yeah.
think he was just blindly stabbing me at that point. And so I
Wow.
think, if my hand wasn't here, it would have been just gone through my face. And the one on my ear, like, it was a pretty deep cut. like they had a plastic surgeon come and sew it up, thankfully, but it didn't go across my face. It kind of stayed right next to my ear. And even the one back of my neck, I'm just always like, thank God that wasn't deeper.
Yeah, because that's, I mean, there's just so much information and your spinal cord and
right.
oh my goodness. What happened next? Your mom comes in. I mean, your mom calls you here on the Garfield phone, which I also love. Do you still have that phone?
No, she got rid of it, and I'm still a little sad about it. I think I kind of told her, I'm like, I don't want to see anything in this room.
Yeah. I'm sure you were done. But so you heard that they were coming. Do you remember when they got there?
I do. She kind of came in with like this big towel because it's really strange what you remember, right? I was sleeping in a navy blue t-shirt and just underwear, which is pretty unusual for me. And so having that dark shirt, I don't think in a dark room, she couldn't really tell that I was bleeding. And so she saw my leg wound. And so she came in with this towel trying to like wrap a towel around my leg. And I was just like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I'm trying to make this tourniquet. I'm like, oh, okay. But she even said, she's like, you just kept saying like, I'm dying. Like, where are they? Because that's all I could focus on. And I remember laying on the floor and seeing this flashlight kind of coming into my room, and it was the police. And I'll explain why I felt like it took them forever. The fire station happens to be literally across the street from her house. And so I just like, what is taking so long? And they told me that because it was a crime situation, they had to wait for the police to show up first.
Really?
Yeah.
Even if your life is in danger?
Yeah, I guess so. That's what I was told.
That's kind of crazy.
I know.
Yeah.
I could have preferred not to have to wait.
Yeah. Right?
So
they were the first responders who could have started the life-saving techniques and got into the hospital were waiting for the police to show up and assess the scene.
Yeah, they kind of all came in together, but the police, definitely, I remember a flashlight, and I'm not sure why my mom didn't turn on the light, but again, it was that, like you said, who knows what you would do.
Right.
I think her main focus was just get to me.
Yeah.
And so I just, they were like, hey, we're the police, we're here to help you. And then kind of this like group of men came in and just started to like assess the situation. And I remember them saying things like, we have another one. Oh my God. Like they just had no idea, how bad it was. And they cut my shirt off and I threw up all over the floor. I mean, it was just this very like, because I knew I was dying and I was like, just get me to the hospital. Like, and so that was like, I think a shock for them, because later on I did visit with them and say thank you. And they were told that you had I had a leg wound. That was the only thing they were told. But then they walk into the situation of someone being, brutally stabbed
multiple times. Yeah.
And just,
so when do you remember the ambulance ride?
I do. Yeah.
And you still you knew what they didn't until they got to you and saw your wounds.
Right.
You knew you were actually dying. It wasn't hyperbole.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, there was no hyperbole about it at all. In fact, in the ambulance, I started to kind of pass out. I remember I just had no strength left to open my eyes. Like I just couldn't do it, but I was like, just stay, I was just like, I'm going to stay awake. And they kept saying like, stay with us, Lynn, stay with us, Lynn. And if you fall asleep, you're more likely to die. I mean, they're telling me all this as I'm being, driven to the hospital. And I was like, I'm here. But I do remember at one point I kind of started to pass out and they're like, no. And I was like, okay, I'm here, So like, I just did that's what I could do. I'm like, I'm going to save my strength to just stay alive and stay awake and not fall asleep.
Wow. So when they got you into the hospital, what happened then?
I remember being with, a group of like a surgeon and a group of nurses. And it was such like it feels like a scene from ER, when you think about like the dramatics of those shows, but that's how it felt to me. And I remember this nurse was like because I had 4 earrings in my ear, and she was like, do you have any other piercings? And taking my ears. I was like, no, and then someone said that I needed blood, and it was like negative AB. So I'm like screaming out my blood type, and she's like, negative AB. Okay. Negative AB, so like, I'm just literally doing everything I can to help them save me essentially. And, but I also remember how just awful it was. Like I could feel everything that they were doing. They cut my belly button and put this jam this tube up me after I drink this nasty drink.
Why?
And they told me, they were like, we're checking for internal bleeding.
Oh,
but I could literally feel the tube like getting jammed in my stomach. And I was just like, I don't think I want to feel this anymore. I was like, I'm here, man. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm not sure, and I remember them calling in the plastic surgeon and they were trying to have me lift my fingers. And after I couldn't lift any of them, and I just was like, I can't do it. like, I can't do it. Let's move on.
Mm.
I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
and then at one point, I mean, there was a nurse putting a catheter. And so she had my leg up and my hips off the table. And, it was just,
It sounds barbaric.
it kind of was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't
Yeah.
blame them. I mean, they're working fast and they can't worry about,
No,
modesty at that
how you
point,
feel in
obviously.
modesty and all of that doesn't
But
matter at that
yeah,
point because they
yeah.
need it's. And did they put you out? Did they?
Eventually, yeah, they kept telling me, well, we can't put you to sleep because then you're more likely to die. And I was like, okay, thank you. And then I would literally be like, can you put me to sleep now? I just didn't want to feel it. But they started to do like an MRI or CAT scan. I can't remember which, to just, again, assess the bleeding situation. And I remember, I think I told them, like, I'm going to throw up. I'm going to throw up again. And I turned my face, I threw up, and then all of a sudden, like, blood started pouring everywhere because one of my wounds had opened back up. And I think before they even realized, because again, they're hearing vomit, but I
Right.
looked up and said, I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding. And they were like, oh my God, she's bleeding. And that was really when I started to die. Like, I felt
Ah,
like this sensation of cold I can't explain because it was from inside of me.
yeah.
And the nurse right kind of above my head she was like, her lips are, she was telling me that my lips were blue and telling
Mm.
them my lips were blue, and they were
Yeah.
running
Yeah.
me down the corridor.
She was alarmed. Yeah.
Yeah, like I didn't look so good apparently. So,
Wow.
and they were running me, and I'm just watching the lights kind of go, flash as we're running
Mm-hmm.
down the hallway. And the doctor said, "Okay, honey, we're going to put you to sleep now." And I was like, "Okay, thank you." And that's when they finally put me to sleep, and they just did exploratory surgery at that point.
Wow. So did you have internal bleeding?
My spleen was stabbed through twice. It was a 6-inch steak knife, and so in various, obviously in my wrist, but my wrist, like, it went down to the bone. Like, there were chips of bone missing from my, in my wrist. And
Mm.
then, but in my torso and my leg, that went through the entire way. So my spleen was cut through twice, and they had to remove that. My lung was punctured, and so I had to have a tube going into my lung. One of the stab wounds went into my pancreas, so I had to, like, it went through my spleen into my pancreas, so I had to have a tube coming out of my pancreas. Like, I had so many tubes coming out of me. So yeah, I had a lot of
Yeah, you had
nasty
a
injuries.
lot. You were on life support?
I
Is that
was
right?
for about 5 days.
Wow. Wow. And did they revive you or did you
Yeah.
you came out of that on your own or did they bring you out?
So, when I read my medical report, they did have to resuscitate me a few times on the table, which is,
Mm. So scary.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
when because no one just tells you, like, we had to do this and this and this. But I remember the first day I was mostly asleep. And then I do remember being pretty alert on life support, like the last day or two, because I had some friends coming and I was trying to ask them about prom, because they were still in high school. They were seniors at that point, people I danced with. And so I'm like trying through this tube to ask,
Right.
I don't
Right.
know. It's just,
It's
it
well,
seems so
because you're
silly.
still you.
Right. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I legit want to know how prom was because I
Right.
loved prom. It was fun, So like, I'm
And
trying
probably a
to.
lot more fun than you've been having for the last
Right.
few
Absolutely.
days.
Yeah, definitely. So I remember them, I do remember taking me off life support.
Tell me about your attacker.
I will say first and foremost that they never charged him with my crime. So I can't say like 100% he's the one, but I do know that the crimes stopped happening after they finally apprehended him.
Ah.
And some articles came out about him a few years. So basically after me, a couple years later is when he was apprehended. So he was this, in the article, they say a GQ good looks, and he came from a wealthy family. So he was, again, very upper class. He apparently drove a Porsche. Financially, he wasn't doing as well, but he had these beautiful wives. Like his first wife was this, I mean, they put a picture of her in there and she really was beautiful. And
White
just,
guy.
yeah, white.
Mhm.
And it was interesting what I could ascertain in the middle of the night because I kind
Right.
of just knew. I was like, I think, because I'm 5'8", right? So I know how tall I am sitting down. He was a little
Mhm.
bit taller than me, but not just gigantic. So I was like, I think he's probably around 5'11", 6 feet tall. I think he's in his early 40s. He's definitely white.
Yeah.
So I at least had a
Yeah.
little bit of an idea. And again, I'm not even sure exactly how. I just sort of knew. And like one of my friends later on told me that her dad, who's a lawyer, said that, oh, I know that guy. He belongs to my country club.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So you were not his only victim.
Oh no.
So tell me about the other ones.
There were a lot. Again, he was convicted of 2. So that's all I can say was convicted. But in this article, I mean, just rereading it for my book it was horrible. But there were girls like as young as like 7 or 8 that he supposedly, took in the backyard and stabbed. Or one time, supposedly he was found in his car with a little girl in the car with him, all the way up to someone around 40. But the two that he was convicted on, one was in her apartment. She had a friend sleeping over, and he kind of, this is 98, so cell phones weren't as they were around, but not as common. But I guess he asked to like use the phone, and she started to close the door, and he just shoved it open and stabbed her. But he never like touched her friend. He never went into the house. Like he just stabbed her in the doorway and then ran off. The other girl was about 16, I believe, and she was in her apartment complex in the laundry room, and he tried to rape her. He then strangled her with a tie and like broke her jaw, and she fought her way out. So it was similar but different with each of his victims. It was, part of me is like, I've always struggled with what was it about me? And I finally kind of had to let that question go, because it was like, do I look like his mother? Or like, because there must have been some similarity between all of us, that most of us were around that 16 to 25-year-old age range, I would say. But again,
do you think he was watching you?
I think what happened, I got there on like a Wednesday, and I worked at a drugstore. They would just come let me work hours whenever I came home for extra money. And so I worked at the drugstore, and then I went to the mall to get my mom a Mother's Day present. So those are literally the two places I went. And both of those locations are very, very close to my mom's house. Especially at 21, I don't think I would have been as, it wouldn't have been as obvious to me someone was following me, but especially in such a short distance. It was so short. And so I never noticed anyone following me. I don't even now, still to this day, remember ever seeing him, but he had to have seen me in one of those two places and followed me home.
Wow.
And, as people that do this kind of thing early on, it's a long time usually between when they see someone and then when they act. And that time gets shorter and shorter as they get more confident, I guess, is like a better word.
How many of his victims died?
Only one that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so somehow, I don't know. I mean, we're all extremely lucky. And in fact, one of the nurses, when I told her what happened to me, she said, "Oh my God, 3 weeks ago, this woman in my apartment complex got bludgeoned with a pipe iron in the elevator." And I have to think that was him too. So I don't know if it's just, like you said, this fit of rage that just, I don't know.
Was anybody ever able to question him and find out more about his motives or profile him in any way?
Not that I know of. I think the cops had been on to him for a while. In fact, and this is all, backed up in the article and some other places, that they were following him the night that he attacked me, and got called away on a drug case or something. So, that doesn't make me feel great either. But
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
and then
right before he gets to you, they're no longer following him.
Right. And they would, they would never admit that to me at the time, of course, but that came out, and I had to read about that. And I was like, oh my God, like that was horrifying.
So I want to talk about this a little bit. I want to talk about victim shaming. I found this on December 3rd, 1998, the Tampa Bay News published an article with the following headline: Attorney General Janet Reno has ordered an informal inquiry into the Boca Raton Police Department's practice of downgrading hundreds of crimes to enhance the city's image as a safe place to live. Which is just startling to me, first of all. I mean, I get it. I get that they want Boca to be seen as a safe place to live, but to go to the lengths to downgrade serious crimes like the one, let's just say yours, or to cover them up seems it's so corrupt to me. It's another level of corrupt that I would not have known about had I not spoken with you. So I know that you had to take a lie detector test. Is that correct? Can you tell me what the explanation was and why that came about?
They told me that people do stuff like this to themselves. And I still to this day think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But, I complied.
Stab themselves 7 times. We didn't mention that you lost 21 pints of blood.
Yeah, that's the approximate that I was told between like my house and the ambulance and then getting to the
So
the hospital. It's obviously like there's not a beaker sitting there, but
right.
that was the approximate, like.
But I mean, that's like, I don't know how much blood the human body has. Maybe, hon, you can tell us at some point. But um,
It's less
that's
than that. It's less than that.
is
I
it?
think that
Yeah,
includes like all the fluids they were trying to give me, and then I would lose more, and then so it's adding up all of that together.
right. So it would be suicide. It wouldn't be a cry for attention
Oh,
had you done
right.
this to yourself. You'd be
Right, right.
killing yourself.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
what
yeah.
they're talking about is more of a cry for attention, right? People do this kind of things to themselves to get attention.
I think that, or they do this to kill themselves. I don't know. I
But
mean,
I,
they just
yeah,
that's all they really kept saying to me is like, "Oh, people do them this kind of stuff." And
okay.
part of the reason I know that they went down that road is because I had suffered from depression, and I, never hid that. But I'm also a very smart person, and I know how, like like this makes no sense, especially being a dancer. I would never ever hurt my leg, and like I don't, just
Right.
the facts alone and the fact that I lived through it,
Yeah.
period,
Yeah.
was to me proof enough. And that did not even cross my mind at all until I had a psychiatrist come and like talk to me in the hospital. And so
Mm.
then after that, then then now I'm aware that this is going on, that I'm having to now prove my innocence and fight for my life still. And, and I don't know what's going to happen after this. And is my leg going to, I never lost hope, but there's always that in the back of my mind, like, how am I going to recover from this?
Yeah.
And then, God, taking that lie detector test was almost like the ultimate slap in the face. I just felt so disrespected, and I just couldn't believe that I had to sit here and defend myself for something like this. And now, even knowing even more that they knew about this man and they're still putting me through that, like, I'm
They were
trying not to get angry
following
now.
him.
I'm just
Yeah.
so angry. It made me so angry. I wanted to like pick that up and just chuck it across the room and smash it into a
Yes.
billion pieces. And it was just because it was so disrespectful and, like you said, unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is still a hard one for me. And I even say in my book, like, what's worse, having this happen or not being believed? And I still find that to be very true.
Right. Right. Well, it's, I mean, I've heard of victim shaming and in all, usually with women,
Hmm.
sometimes with men, sometimes with young men,
Yeah.
but usually with women and girls, of
Hmm.
that age span. And it's like, do you think you might have done something to bring this on? Do you think that you might have, but putting the onus on you, that maybe that you created this somehow, or caught this person's attention, or when in fact you were literally sleeping in your own bed,
Right.
and had done nothing to bring it on. So they asked you to take a lie detector test, but how were you treated generally by the police during that time?
I would say kind of cold. I do
Mm-hmm.
remember asking the lead detective on my case one time. I just looked at him. I said, because he kind of, I don't know, I don't remember what prompted me to say this to him, but I was like, "Do you have a daughter?" And he was like, "Yes, I do." And I'm like, "What I want right now is for you to treat me as if I were your daughter. If this happened to your daughter, what would you be doing? That's what I want."
Yeah.
Because I think that's what should be happening.
Yes.
And so it was just my way of just pleading to please, treat this seriously and treat me with respect. And because I kept getting asked over and over again, like, "Did you drink a lot of alcohol? There's wine in your mom's fridge." And I'm like, "I don't even like wine. Like, that was not even mine. Like, I don't live here,
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And even if I did have wine, like,
So
what?"
what? Yeah.
Right? I just couldn't understand it. And I'm like, "You had copious amounts of blood. You could have tested and seen that I had nothing in my system." Like, I mean, it
Right.
was just so stupid because I just felt like it was over and over and over again. And I'm like, "Listen, man, like, no, like, I still don't believe them that people do this to themselves." I think I said to them, like, they must have been on so much drugs. Like, they had no idea what was happening. Like, and I'm very well aware of what was going on.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but I would say
Wow.
cold. Yeah.
Did you have, like, was your mom with you through this process? Did you have an attorney? Did you have friends? Was it just you going through it?
In a lot of ways, it felt like just me, of course, because who else can relate to it in the way that
Mm.
I could? And that felt very alone. My mom, of course, had her own struggles and trauma throughout this as well. I did not have an attorney, but I definitely had friends and I felt supported, but I also felt like people were really scared and kind of didn't want me to be in their home or to go sleep over. Because, of course, my mom, like, once I got out of the hospital, we were kind of terrified to sleep there.
Oh yeah.
And one couple opened their home to us, but there were plenty of other people that didn't. And even when I left, my mom, she was told, like, sometimes people would be more open if it was just her, but even people refused her to go sleep at their house.
Wow. Well, and he was still at large at that
Yes.
point.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea was maybe that you had been targeted, he had been unsuccessful in killing you, and that he might come back to
Right.
make another attempt. And so that really leaves you and your mom in a quandary,
Yeah.
because you certainly don't want to be bait back in the place where he attacked you. Um, and you can identify him,
Right.
and
Right.
I mean, as much as you could in the dark while you were being stabbed, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm actually really impressed that you were able to give that much of a description from just, I think about this sometimes, and this sounds silly, like I'll be in the grocery store and I'll be like, okay, if I had to say what the cashier looked like, later on,
Right.
what would I say? And I'm like, I don't remember. Like, I don't remember anything about the person I just had an exchange with.
Right.
And you were in the dark on your stomach, and you were cognizant enough to think about height based on how tall you are and where you sit and blah blah blah. That's really impressive.
Thanks.
It really is. Um, your book is called Choosing Survival, and you shouldn't have survived this. Like, the odds are that you wouldn't have
Right.
survived this, but you
Oh,
did.
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever go back and confront any of the people that victim shamed you during this process?
No, a lot of them were kind of strangers, half the time,
Yeah.
or yeah, I remember one was like my roommate's mother when I went to, back to college, and so people that I just didn't see regularly. But I think I was just so young and stunned. I'm not a confrontational person by nature,
Right.
um, but I mean, those words still sting me to a degree. But I do remember coming to this realization that like my situation makes them feel unsafe, and in I think our human brain, if like I cause this to happen in some way, it means that they're safe.
Yeah.
Right. And I just kind of had to come to this place to not just be in so much anger. And,
Mhm.
because one man literally asked me, like, what did you do to piss him off? And I was like,
Wow.
what?
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, and it was an older man. And I don't even know why I was talking to him. I don't remember, but it was just that was probably the most disgusting thing that was said to me. Um, but that's really the realization I could come to. And it's made me obviously a lot more aware of, it doesn't matter if I was like, I'm sure people thinking I'm 21, I'm out like clubbing or whatever. And even if I
Mhm.
was, it doesn't matter,
Right.
it's, and that's what's so infuriating. But I think as a society, our brains are just so desperate to keep us safe, right? That we have to
Yes.
just make it there's another reason it can't be random, especially to a seemingly nice person who wasn't out, doing something that she shouldn't have been doing or whatever.
Yeah, no, that part, I do that too. I watch these horrific things on the news, and I want to watch until I know that it was specifically about them.
Hmm.
Like, oh, this couldn't have happened to me because,
Right.
this was on the bus, or, and I don't take the
Right.
bus, or like
Right.
whatever,
Right.
whatever it was. I want to make sure that I'm safe. You're so
Hmm.
right.
Hmm.
And of course, I would never want to do that at the expense of anyone else. But
Yes.
it's really good to hear from yours as the victim, that people need to be really considerate
Hmm.
when approaching a victim of a crime as to how they phrase things, and even if they are trying to keep themselves safe, to be really mindful of the fact that someone went through this,
Hmm.
and they may or may not still be healing from it, probably still healing, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
um Speaking of that, you told me that you have an alter ego, like an inner critic,
Uh-huh.
that you've given a name to.
Yes. Her name's Betty.
Betty.
Uh-huh.
Betty. Tell me some of the things that Betty would say to you.
You're fat, stupid, ugly, lazy. You're never good enough. When I'm creating something, it's always like this dance sucks. This book sucks. Everything sucks. Like you're not good enough ever.
Mm,
And no matter what I achieve, like if I get 100%, it's kind of like, okay, well that's what you should get. So next time,
right. Right. No,
it's like
no,
there's
no
never
prize for you
right.
for
Exactly.
getting
Hmm.
100%.
Hmm.
And then you and I talked a little bit about the role EMDR played in your recovery. Can you
Hmm.
explain what that is, and why it was helpful to you, or why it is helpful to you if you're still doing
Yeah.
it?
It very layman's terms is the way I understand it. It's kind of a way to get your subconscious mind more forward into your conscious mind. And it's kind of it kind of puts you in like an REM state, like you would when you're sleeping, to again bring that more subconscious mind forward so that you are aware of it and what it's trying to tell you and what it's been keeping from you. And so they normally the way I understand it is normally they'll have you do eye movements, like this rapid eye movement, again, to also get your right and left hemispheres kind of online and synced up. That, for whatever reason, made me super nauseous. So she ended up tapping on my legs with my eyes closed.
Mm.
And she would just kind of talk me in some, you're fully awake and aware, but you get kind of to this more relaxed state.
And this is
And
a therapist who was doing
yes.
this? Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, first of all, you must have a very trusting relationship with your therapist before you even try this. So it's not like
Yeah.
you can just walk in and say, hey, what
Right.
about this thing? And she had kind of had me like go create this like safe space in my mind, and like I could return at any time. Like there's all these things that allow me to feel more safe and in like a contained environment. And then she had me go into like, and again, this is all in my mind, but I had to go into a cave and kind of get deeper into the cave. And then she had me watch a TV screen. And that didn't work for me that well, but she explained that's sometimes a way for people to feel safer because they're watching it happen instead of experiencing it again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why that didn't work for me, but we just kind of kept going deeper into this cave, and I would just get these weird sensations all through my body. Like it felt kind of like Alice in Wonderland going on. Like I would kind of grow and then shrink, or I felt really heavy and like a lead weight. So I was experiencing all these strange emotions and feelings and sensations, but I definitely ended up meeting one of my inner children. I think we have many, but and I just knew that this wasn't necessarily related to the attack. Like I went to her to help with the stabbing, but I remember all of that, and this was something that had happened to me when I was really little that I did not remember. But I think it's affected me all throughout my life, and it was just such a powerful experience. It's also really, really difficult. I will say it feels like your brains are just kind of thrown out and you're trying to like pick them and put them back together, because it is such an odd feeling and experience, because I'm also in the sense of trying to make sense of it. Like, is this real? Is this my brain? Like, what is going on? And the way I experienced some of those memories is just kind of being like this floaty mist on the ceiling and seeing these eyeballs kind of like just looking down on this little version of myself in this little cheerleading outfit. I mean, I knew the cheerleading outfit. I knew exactly which one it was. But when I met her, she was holding this little stuffed bunny that I used to carry around at that age. And she was just covered in like twigs and dirt. And she was like so sad and so lonely. I mean, it still makes me emotional, because it was just, and then I had to think that I did that to her. I left her just to kind of be alone in the woods, scared. And it sounds strange, but when you're going through it, it's such a healing process, because you're bringing this part of yourself that has kind of been left and abandoned and scared and alone to like come and be loved and be reunited. And I still don't have super like getting attacked. I know exactly what happened, what I was smelling, what I was seeing, everything, but this is still very like kind of weird, dreamy like pieces. But even having an experienced therapist tell me like, this is very typical how this happens for people. Like what you're describing, I've heard from many, many other people.
Wow.
And that was validating in a way, like, okay, this is real and there's something here. But it helped even in my trauma recovery with other things that happened, because I was able to bring in this other piece that desperately needed to be healed.
That's fascinating, first of all. When you say you left her, the little girl, what do you mean by that?
I think when you're young and you go through this horrible, like something really traumatic, your brain that's kind of why we separate, and we disassociate, right? It's just to keep us safe. And I think something happens where you sort of leave whoever that was that happened to at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. Like, I don't know.
I think that
way,
you did really well.
Okay,
I completely understand that. In order to move on, you compartmentalize that, or you suppress it, and that you don't process it,
right?
Because it's too painful at that time. Wow. So you talked about healing through art as well. Tell me about that.
I think art, all kinds of art, speak to us differently than like a conversation or other types of words. I think this is an incredible energy response, especially when dance, which is my main field of expertise, if you will. But there's such an incredible, intense, powerful energy exchange that happens that I can't even put into words necessarily. And it's also a place that I felt the safest to express a lot of things because I didn't know how to verbalize it. Or, I couldn't have someone victim shame me or whatever, or tell me that wasn't true or anything like that. Like, here is my story, and I'm going to lay it out with everything that I have. And I think it helps other people be seen, because they're watching something take place, or even if it's like a show, or if it's a piece of like a painting, there's something in there that kind of helps you as the person watching or taking it in to be seen and relatable. It's like, now I can somehow relate to someone else that has had something experience that's similar. But yeah, it's just, I think it's another part of being human that unfortunately a lot of people kind of brush aside as not being important,
Right.
or, as valid as like math or whatever. They're all valid, but it's just, we're people. We need to be touched. We need to have these things in our lives that don't make us robots, right? And so to me, it's like, if the more art you can take in or even try, it's just a different way for us to express and to bring things out. So art therapy, dance therapy, I think they're music therapy. They're all just a way to have our brains communicate in a way that maybe our logical mind can't.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I know you're right, but there are art programs being cut in schools because they're seen as non-essential.
Right.
The essential things are the STEM stuff and the art and anything, even physical education.
Oh yeah.
Those are also being cut down because they're seen as non-essential, and I think we're going to suffer the repercussions of that, or we already are probably.
Yeah.
But even more so as these children become adults who did not have that outlet or have a way to express themselves.
Right.
Because, you're asking kids to go through these very siloed experiences in school and then not have an outlet to express their feelings.
Right.
Right. Either through creative writing or ceramics or painting or dance or acting. Any of those places could be a place to bring that stuff. And without it, I don't know what happens.
Yeah.
I know we're getting close to wrapping up. I wanted to ask you, going back to Boca Raton, do you think that your book, your case, Janet Reno's inquiry, had an impact on the corruption in the police department there?
I think Janet Reno did.
Yeah.
Probably.
She's pretty formidable, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I certainly hope so. Since I just released, I mean, this was 20 years. More than that now. I don't know that my book would have any impact on it. And someone did ask me once, like, would you want them to reopen the case? And I was like, honestly, no. I think there wasn't enough evidence. It wasn't well done, whatever. It wasn't well executed at the time. So I just think it would be reopening all of this stuff for me that is not going to help. But I sincerely hope that Janet Reno cleaned it up, and it is a much better place now.
Is he still alive?
From what I know about, I want to say about 10 years ago, I was told that he was up, like he was in trial again to be let off or something. And because he'd gotten double life sentences and the verdict stood and he's still in jail. I have not looked up if he's alive. Because again, I can't walk around in fear all the time. He's going to find me. That was scary. Like when I went back to college, like I did that thing where no one can find you, like you don't exist kind of thing. But now I'm kind of like, I can't just live in fear, and I want my experience to help others in some way. And so if I just stay in hiding, that's never going to happen.
Wait, what is that thing where no one can find you?
I can't remember what they call it, but you can have the administration basically like,
oh, I see. Yeah.
Like make it so if they looked up your name, like they can't tell you that
you're like erased from the system.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. I'm glad they have that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So again, your book is called Choosing Survival. Where can people find it?
Right now on Amazon. I would like to get it into more places, but I know it's kind of a work in progress. But Amazon, there's a paperback, a hardback, and electronic version as well. And I hope to do an audiobook soon.
Yes. Yeah, definitely you should.
Thanks.
And then tell me where they can find you.
They can find me on my website at lynnforney.com. That's LYNNFORNEY.
The second most famous Lynn in the world.
Right, that's right. I don't know if I'll ever top Lynn Redgrave, but that's okay. And then, on Instagram at Lynn Forney or at Choosing Survival as well. It's another good place.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I mean, brave is the word that comes to mind several times. 1, for telling the story. 2, for saving your own life. 3, for advocating for yourself. And then 4, for telling your story in a way that will help others. Thank you for that bravery, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lynn Forney, and I'm the only one in the room who was stabbed 7 times by a stranger.